Hey everybody, welcome back to South Baltimore Now. We don't do this often, but it's fun, Kev. It's fun to come on here, and we started this last year, like a year in review, kind of a wrap up of the year in southbmore.com. So that's what we're doing here today. We are fast approaching the end of 2025, and we've got a lot of things going on around South Baltimore. I mean, this year, Kev, it's been nuts.
Yeah, for sure. Never a slow time around South Baltimore, which is a good thing when you run a website about South Baltimore. Yeah, it seems like development's starting to pick up. I mean, there's so many darn retail spaces in South Baltimore that there's always stuff coming and going. There's a lot of cool events that are going to be coming next year, so we'll have time to talk about that. A couple projects that we've been waiting on for decades have started. So yeah, lots to review. And as always, it was a very eventful year in South Baltimore.
Kev, I think I was counting earlier, and I don't know if you keep track of this or not, but for everybody out there, Kevin's actually producing about 500 articles a year. So, this is somebody who's out there all the time, meeting people, meeting with developers and business owners, and, really getting out there and doing it. And Kev, man, I just got to say, nice work. I mean, that's no easy task.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. It's nice when your job is really just getting a chance to discuss the community that you love and getting able to find out a lot of things before most people. So it really is fun work to do. And, I think when you're like a kid and you have to write a paper, it's like dreadful, but maybe you get later in life and you actually like to write stuff. So I actually don't mind writing about topics I like, which seems like an insane idea to my children. But I tell my kids, basically I have to write a couple papers every day. And they look at me with like a deer in headlights. But, when you do something that you love, it certainly doesn't always feel like work.
I hear that, which is why we enjoy doing this. And you do all the writing. I take care of the podcast. But if you haven't taken a listen before, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. We'd love for you to subscribe and keep going. We've got some exciting topics and guests coming up next year. We love feedback and we love hearing from neighbors. So whether it be on social media, on our Facebook or Instagram, you can always reach out to us. You can find our email here in the show notes and everything. But look, we love your ideas and thoughts and, and letting us know in the comments on what's going on around the neighborhood, So let's kind of get things kicked off here. Kev, if I had to ask you, I know you're very passionate about every article that you write for southbmore.com. But, I'm curious, what are a couple that stand out for you from the past year?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think on a personal level, I love all the coverage we get to do about the growth of youth sports around here. That's something our family is very involved in and something that I love seeing grow in an area. There's so many new club teams around here and there's growing rec league. So it's just, I think as somebody who's involved in that and loves to see it flourish, it's really exciting to me to be able to cover, which is legitimate stories about the growth of youth sports down here and some of the successes teams are having. I think we all moved to a place like South Baltimore because we want to have a lot of fun and live a city type lifestyle. So it's just so cool to hear about cool events that are coming to Baltimore, and we'll talk about those. But knowing that the Blue Angels are coming back, that's going to be awesome. Lionel Messi is going to come to M&T Bank Stadium next year for a soccer game with his team, Inter Miami. So yeah, just it's fun stuff like that, and it's always fun to hear about all the restaurant openings. That's another big aspect of living down here. Those always do really well with the analytics on our website, and and another thing too is, people have been asking me for so many years, what's going to happen with Tide Point when Under Armour leaves, because we've known for a while they're going to make the move to Baltimore Peninsula, and now we have some answers on that. So now when people ask me that question, I can finally start to give them some detail there. So some fun stories, some fun events coming up, some questions finally answered. So as always, it was a fun year to be a journalist in South Baltimore.
For sure. Well, again, man, we appreciate all the hard work you do out there. So let's get into it. Let's talk about some of the development that's going on, and what bigger spot than the peninsula, right?
SouthBaltimore.com, breaking news break here. So we recorded this podcast last week and found out some really big news about the Baltimore Peninsula development the next day. So we really need to add some context before we go into this segment of the podcast. Really, everything we discussed in the podcast is still relevant. We're talking about what's already been built, the leasing activity, the Locke Landing development, which is a completely separate development from Baltimore Peninsula. But we really got to bring in this news before you listen to that segment so that everything is up to speed. So what we found out is that the undeveloped land at the Baltimore Peninsula development, this is a development that spans 177 acres, and a lot of that land has not been developed yet, and that's now going to be in the hands of Bank OZK. That was the lender on that undeveloped land. They also had a loan for the construction portion of the project. So the Baltimore Peninsula development team owners of Sagamore Ventures and Goldman Sachs were not able to come up with a deal to refinance that loan for the undeveloped land or extend it. And that loan's thought to be about $60 million. So that land will now be in the hands of Bank OZK. So we're talking about quite a bit of land. You have the Chapter 1B and Chapter 1 part of the project. You got Sagamore Spirit. Then you have those 5 new buildings that were built, a mix of apartment buildings, office buildings, a hotel, and retail. And it is believed that there are still some pad sites that Sagamore Ventures and Goldman Sachs can still build on. They brought in a new partner, Hines, which is out of Texas, as their asset manager of what they already have. So we will see if that team still builds new things down there. But the land that's now in the hands of Bank OZK, you're talking about the former Baltimore Sun printing plant, all that green space to the west of there. Then on the other side of Hanover Street, you have West Covington Park. You have the parking lot attached to it. There's a former industrial property just north of City Garage, which runs from east to west. And then you have the former Schuster concrete warehouse next to Swan Park. So all that land is going to be in the hands of Bank OZK. And it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. Do they sell all of that to one developer? Are they able to divide it up at all and sell to different developers? Not sure at this time, but what we do know is all that land is likely going to go in a different direction. And as always, it will be interesting to follow Baltimore Peninsula / Port Covington. It's really been one of the biggest stories of the past 10 years. And now it's going to go in a bit of a different direction. And we'll see where that goes. Maybe a new developer comes in that can get a lot done, but we will see. It's probably going to take some time to play out. And I think some things will still happen at the existing Baltimore Peninsula development. But as always, it'll be very interesting, and we will keep you in tune of everything going on down there. But go ahead and listen to this following segment. All of it is still relevant, and all of it talks about a lot of the news that has happened there over the past year and over the past 10 years. Baltimore Peninsula, which we were calling Port Covington as of a few years ago. And really, this has probably been the biggest story in South Baltimore over the past decade. You're talking about a giant piece of property, over 235 acres, that there wasn't a whole lot going on there. There was a lot of failed developments. There was old industrial properties. And obviously, there was this development by Kevin Plank's Sagamore Ventures. He's teamed up with Goldman Sachs. He's had different development partners on that. Now there's starting to be other parcels bought by different developers. So really just the building of this new community has been a huge story in South Baltimore over the last decade. And now we're starting to see things actually open. We're starting to see new townhomes that are being built, which brings homeowners to Baltimore Peninsula. So it's certainly evolving really fast. And I think as of this past year, the thing that's evolving most down there is that Locke Landing development, which is a development by Mark Saperstein's 28 Walker Development Company. And so they got, I think the 2 apartment buildings down there are open or about to open. That's bringing 420 apartments to the community. And then you have the townhome / condo aspect down there, which is bringing a total of 389 homeowner opportunities down there. It looks like they're probably about halfway done the creation of those townhome units down there, which is bringing a variety of different things from these like 24-foot wide townhomes that are going to be on the water, which are going to be right around $1 million. And then you have some 3 to 4 to 5 bedroom options in there. You have these 2-story condos they're selling. So really, every time you drive over the Hanover Street Bridge, you're going to see a new block of townhomes that's been built there. And I actually know 4 to 5 of my own friends that have decided to buy down there. So it's cool to see that sort of become its own community. And anybody that lives in these sort of new townhome developments, you know about the alley life and the parties that happen. So I'm excited for them to think about the parties that are going to happen in that neighborhood, the kids that are going to play wiffle ball and football in the pocket parks down there. And I think all that home ownership down there will be a great asset to make everything else that they are doing at Baltimore Peninsula more successful.
Yeah, just love what is becoming of that whole really unique neighborhood and community down there in and of itself, but definitely still part of South Baltimore, of course.
I think the success of Locke Landing will lead to more townhomes down there. And we're actually sort of already seeing it where the Westport waterfront development, which is now called One Westport, has moved towards townhomes. And you're seeing the first block of townhomes is now up and standing already over there and will be offered for sale soon. So I think you might eventually see like a lot of homeowners living around the middle branch, that waterfront community down there. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. But clearly the townhomes are doing well down there.
And with all this development, with all the new from townhomes to apartments and everything, we got to feed these people. We got to entertain these people, and they need somewhere to, just do some general shopping. You want to talk about any of the new retail spaces that might be coming up?
Yeah, for sure. Kevin Plank's Sagamore Ventures and with their partners, Mag Development was the most recent development partner. They will actually be exiting the project, but they've been busy leasing a lot of those retail spaces and office spaces in those 5 new buildings that they built a couple years ago. So Rye Street Market, that's been open for over a year. That's been a successful restaurant down there. 2 vegan concepts, Slutty Vegan and Bar Vegan, are both open down there. Little Wing is a small coffee shop that has opened in the Roost apartment hotel down there. Vessels, sort of the bar within that hotel. Ben & Jerry's, the famous ice cream place, that's open down there now. Jersey Mike's, everybody loves a hoagie, so Jersey Mike's opened down there in this past year. And then Daily Grind, the coffee shop that first got its name in Fells Point, they have a location down there as well. And then there's a lot of new restaurants that have been announced that'll bring sushi, Mexican food, karaoke food. There's going to be an Asian noodle bar, a Jamaican concept, Expectation, which is a brunch spot. So really, there's going to be a lot of new food options, and I think a lot of them will come online next year. So yeah, hopefully that brings a lot of foot traffic down there. And then on the office leasing side down there, you've seen a lot of transactions. So you got the Robert H. Smith School of Business from the University of Maryland, which is opening down there. Strayer University has somewhat of a satellite campus down there now. You have M&T Bank, you have CFG Bank. So you're really starting to fill out some non-restaurant retail, some office users down there. So yeah, it'll be fun to see how it happens. And little rumor I heard from some friends around the neighborhood, I think there might be a retail announcement at some point that'll make big news and make people very happy. So we will see if that comes to fruition. But I can tell they're working hard on big things down there.
Every time I go over to Canton, they obviously have so many shops, so many retail. It seems like they get all the stuff over there.
If you're looking to buy things, it has almost any type of shop you can think of over there now. But we're starting to see that a little bit here as well. You've seen a resurgence at Southside Marketplace. Obviously, McHenry Road came online in the early days of southbeamore.com and has brought a lot of retail options. And we'll see maybe some big box retail that might end up at Baltimore Peninsula.
Absolutely.
And of course, if you look out any window, there's an Amazon truck at all times. So certainly e-commerce is a big thing these days.
You've talked about some of the bike trails that might connect like Westport to Peninsula, but I'm curious if you've heard or know of anything or just have your own thoughts on like some sort of transportation or easier way for transportation getting from South Baltimore, traditional Fed Hill area down to the Peninsula. Just curious if you have any thoughts on that or have heard anything.
Yeah, for sure. And unfortunately, it's very difficult because you have I-95, which is a federal property, and you have CSX, which is one of the biggest property owners in America, separating Federal Hill and Riverside and Locust Point from Baltimore Peninsula. So those are heavy industrial. That's a heavy industrial yet thin corridor separating the two. I know the partnership, which is down there, the Baltimore Peninsula Partnership, and politicians and everybody down there is constantly trying to figure out ways to make it even a little bit better. And it's difficult just because there's a lot of those properties in between the development and the existing neighborhoods are not owned by the developers. They're owned by massive federal and national entities. I like to ride my bike a lot. And, if you go down Hanover Street, you can sort of hop on that bike path down by Swan Park and sort of snake your way around to Nick's Fish House. And I think there are some opportunities to go underneath Hanover Street there and sort of connect to different parts of the development. As part of the original master plan, there was an idea to have a walking bridge from the end of Light Street, the 1900 block of Light Street, which goes under I-95 over the CSX tracks. I think it has to go over 2 different CSX tracks because there's another CSX track once you get to the bottom of Macomb Street there. So that's kind of an idea they had. And, Construction costs have gotten very high in the last 5 years or so. So something like that's a lot more expensive than when it was originally proposed. And then just dealing with, Federal Highway Administration, probably the State Highway Administration, Baltimore DOT, everybody to try to get that built. It's going to be a challenge. And then there's also the thought of a walking bridge, which has been talked about for decades, a walking bridge connecting Westport to about where Swan Park is. And I think there was definitely some funding aligned for that in the tax financing package that was agreed to for Baltimore. It was Port Covington at the time. So that's another idea. We'll see when that happens. Now that they're actually developing the waterfront of Westport, I think there'll be more desire to get that done. But once again, you're coming across the water, you're dealing with an old CSX bridge, which I think is still owned by CSX. So just a lot of right-of-way issues and environmental issues. And that bridge, to have a loop going around the middle branch is something I've been dreaming of for a long time. And I hope my knees still work by the time that eventually happens. And then I think, too, to make that loop better, I think you need a better deck on the Hanover Street Bridge or a new Hanover Street Bridge. And now with the Key Bridge down and that being probably 4 to 5 years from completion, I don't think you can put any focus on the Hanover Street Bridge while the Key Bridge is down, because we've seen how much increased traffic is now on Hanover Street Bridge and all the corridors getting across the Patapsco River. So yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge. But, I think one way to look at Baltimore Peninsula is if you look at like National Harbor in DC, I don't think they have any rail connections there. There's obviously a little bit of water taxi, but, it might need to market itself a little bit as kind of a destination. Maybe it is a place you drive to, or maybe it's a little bit longer of a bike ride. But once you get there, there's unique things to do. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But without a super great connection between there and like Federal Hill, it has seemingly done well so far. So yeah, we'll track that. But I would definitely recommend people try taking a bike ride down there. I don't think it's bad at all. You cut down by Swan Park, and there's a path that'll lead you all the way into the development. And there's, really no busy streets you have to cross once you get sort of across Hanover Street at Wells. So it's not a bad bike ride. And, get out, walk, and check out a new neighborhood.
So tell me, Kev, so what do you think comes next for Baltimore Peninsula?
Sure, I can tell you what they've discussed. They've talked about the potential for more townhomes down there. We spoke about the success of Locke Landing, so maybe you dedicate more parcels of Baltimore Peninsula to townhomes. We've seen a study for a soccer stadium to go down there. So you could tell the development really wants to put a soccer stadium in the middle of that development. DC United's MLS Next team was the club that was sort of driving that study, that interest, but they've certainly put a marker in the current master plan to have a soccer stadium there. Now, I know that the state is currently not considering funding a soccer stadium down there at the moment from my conversations I've had with state representatives, but it is something that could happen, and maybe they could eventually go for a lesser expensive route of getting that done. Maybe just put a field down there and start small. I know there was mention of possibly data centers going down there, which they said could happen, could be a small part of the development. If you want to get good conversation going online, just drop the word data centers, and I'm sure the comments will follow. But they mentioned that as something, and I know I did a story on the company South Duval took over the property City Garage down there, and they've done really well leasing to life sciences tenants down there. And I know they have a desire to see more life sciences spaces in Baltimore Peninsula. So it'll be interesting to see if any of the parcels down there get dedicated to that. But, I've had conversations with a few developers lately, and it seems like the cost of development is starting to come down a bit. We've seen a couple interest rate drops in the last few months. So I think people in the development world are starting to look towards building stuff again. And I think that certainly benefits Baltimore Peninsula because outside of the townhomes we've seen by 28 Walker, we haven't seen any new buildings built or proposed in that development in the last couple of years. So maybe with prices coming down a little bit, that is something you will see. But, there's certainly a lot more to do down there now than there was a few years ago. And as always, it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Heading up to Locust Point area, let's talk a little bit about the redevelopment of the former Under Armour facility down there at Tide Point.
Yeah, for sure. A couple massive properties, and it's important to distinguish. It's two different properties and two different projects that'll happen down there. So there's the old Cheer building, which is on the south side of the train tracks down there, kind of a big metal building that Under Armour converted just as a tenant. into a building that was part office space, part warehouse space, part indoor parking. So that building is under contract with Cristo Rey, which is a high school that is a national concept, but currently has a Baltimore school in Fells Point. So they want to move their school over to Locust Point and convert that building into a space that has classrooms, has an indoor gymnasium. They want to tear down part of that building and put in a field that could be used by their soccer team. And they've spoken about potentially having some community partnerships where that field could also be used by recreational sports users in the community. So we'll likely, sounds like that project is moving forward, and we might see a lot of movement on that in the next year or so. So that would be a big change to that property. Then across the street, you have the Tide Point complex, which has, I think, close to or over 500,000 square feet of office space. And we don't have a ton of details on that yet. There's also the parking lots that sort of surround it, but I know there's a plan for a mixed-use development there, and that will certainly bring about a lot of change to Locust Point. Talking about bringing in a new school that brings in a field. They'll have a gymnasium in there as well. Probably a mix of a lot of new residents and maybe some retail down at Tide Point. So certainly will be a big change. We've got Under Armour down the street now, maybe about 1.5 miles away in Baltimore Peninsula, but now their ex-headquarters is empty, and there's a lot of ideas circling to get that reactivated.
Let's take it back up from Locust Point, back into the heart of Federal Hill. You recently wrote an article about the old Chauffeur's building that's been vacant for quite some time now. Just great to hear that there's some action happening right there at Chauffeur's now.
Yeah, absolutely. When you think of Federal Hill, you just think about the land of a million row homes. So it's not common that you have these just huge properties in the middle of Federal Hill. And this Chauffeur's building at 930 South Charles Street, I think you could make the argument that and Cross Street Market and Federal Hill Park are probably the three most properties of significance in the community, just based on size and scale and potential impact. So CAM Development is teaming up with Hank Chauffeur, the owner of Chauffeur's Furniture, Obrecht Real Properties, on this plan to redevelop this property. It's a 6,000 square foot building. They want to bring 51 apartments, do a historic renovation, and then they want to have 12,000 square feet of commercial and retail space on the first level. They're trying really hard to get a grocery store in there, which is something I know the Federal Hill community has wanted for a long time. So they're going to go through the design process on that project in 2026, and they're hoping to start construction on that in early 2027. So certainly you bring that entire block to life, which has been largely vacant for the past 4 years, could certainly have a big impact on Federal Hill.
A few blocks from Chauffeur's, we got the Stadium Square. So that's back up, and looks like there's some movement there too, huh?
Yeah, for sure. The site of the old post office on Austin Street there. Sage Ventures has picked up this 316 apartment building project. They purchased that from Lennar, had taken the past phases of that project and moved it forward. And they came in and they're under construction already. And just talking to the developers from Sage Ventures, they just said the fact that this project had already been planned out and gone through the permitting process and the planning process and the design process, and the fact that they had all these pieces to the garage already sitting in storage, already paid for, already prefabricated, allowed the finances to work to get this project started right away. So if you're talking about that Austin Street corridor that connects M&T Bank Stadium and the Casino District into Federal Hill, this was certainly a big missing piece. So if you have this new apartment building, that certainly fills one of the missing gaps there. Then you look at what else is going on Austin Street. There's a office flex building called Stadium Crossing at 175 West Austin. There's an expansion project going on there to raise the roof to make that building have an additional level of office space. Another block down, we have the Paramount Baltimore live music venue. So that's back under construction. That was delayed for a couple of years. That's going to be 3,950 seats in there. So hopefully a lot of really good touring acts and comedians will bring their shows to that building, bring more life to Austin Street and that stadium area. And then you have the Warner Street district, which connects the casino to M&T Bank Stadium. So Warner Street is like completely torn up right now. They're going to make it much better streetscaping down there because obviously you have Top Golf down there now. You have the casino. They're really working hard to get a hotel there. Then you'll have the Paramount. Then there's another property they're looking to get a sort of large entertainment slash retail user in. So slowly but surely, it's all starting to come together down there. And then M&T Bank Stadium, they just keep renovating that stadium. They brought in new suites and amenity spaces and new scoreboards and all kinds of stuff there over the last few years. There's one more year of off-season renovations they're going to do to that stadium, but hopefully just really that Austin Street corridor into Federal Hill will finally come to fruition the way we have been hoping it would for the last 5 years or so.
Well, let's hope that M&T doesn't have off-season construction start too soon, right? Hopefully get to the playoffs still.
Yeah, still a possibility.
Yeah, still a possibility. But also Oriole Park, we got some renovations there too, right?
Absolutely. There was this state bill a few years ago to dedicate $1.2 billion to the two teams to do renovations to the stadium. The Ravens wasted no time making additions to M&T Bank Stadium, but now the Orioles, and they've had new ownership of David Rubenstein the last couple of years, they're starting to do their renovations. And I know people are expecting bigger things to happen at Camden Yards, but they're starting to do some I call them smaller. It's a lot of money though, but they're putting in a giant new Jumbotron video board this year. And underneath that Jumbotron is going to be a new premium section. They're converting the press box into new premium club area suites, moving the press box to somewhere else. So those are some projects that are happening this offseason, but I think people really expect to see some bigger projects coming to that stadium in the coming years. Do you take away some of the seats in the upper deck and put in, more bar areas or more social areas? We'll see. Do you have any more sort of field level suite opportunities? There's a talk, and this deal has not been agreed upon, but there's a large desire by the team and the stadium authority to see some redevelopment in the spaces right around the stadium where there's currently parking lots. So we will see where all of that goes, but there's certainly a lot of changes going on when it comes to the two stadiums in Baltimore, or the two big stadiums in Baltimore. Yeah, so one other exciting project is the B&O Railroad Museum over there in Pigtown is undergoing a $38 million campus transformation right now, which will bring in a big public plaza, kind of reorient the museum a little bit, some new exhibits, some new classroom space, some new cafe space. So cool project for Pigtown. When my boys were young, they just loved going to the train museum, seeing all the trains. Whether you're huge into trains or not, just to go in there and just see all these train engines and locomotives, and really which is so much a part of the history of Baltimore is the building of the B&O Railroad. Really cool museum. It's exciting to see that they're upgrading it, but not only upgrading the museum experience, but also really pouring into the community with that new sort of public outdoor space. So really cool project.
So as much as it's great to hear about all the new townhomes and retail and other office space and all that coming in, we still have those classic elements that tie everything together that keep that, that true industry of Baltimore alive and well, which is obviously very important and I think makes us a very unique city. But yeah, we don't have enough time to really talk about all the retail closings and openings that have happened all over the peninsula, but I know there's been a few of note that I'm sure you'd love to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mother's Federal Hill Grill really helped put Federal Hill on the map, really an iconic property. They closed last year, but now it's reopened as Liv's Tavern. This is a concept from the team behind Wayward. They had Banditos down in Federal Hill. They have some other restaurants. So they really took on a very thorough renovation of the Mother's space, gutted it, rebuilt it. The old purple patio has been rebuilt into really a true outdoor bar space with all these shipping containers and televisions out there. So yeah, I was at a party there this past weekend and really looks nice in there. Really looks like an upscale space in Federal Hill and really meets a lot of different ways you might want to dine. Do you want to stand around outside? I know they got some solo stoves out there. There's the bar area. There's the dining area. They were telling me how they're going to turn that old Mother's on the Alley space into an event space back there. So really a really large property in Federal Hill that's gone a different direction. It's been renovated and hopefully it's really a uplifting restaurant for Federal Hill. Moving over to Locust Point, there's sort of that large restaurant space at the end of McHenry Row. It's been World of Beer. It's been Fat Patties. It's been Chicks, a chicken concept. So now the latest restaurant that's going to be moving in there is Taco Love, a space that we're already familiar with. They have a location at Cross Street Market. They got their start in White Marsh. So they're bringing their Mexican concept to McHenry Row. That space has a large outdoor area, has a large bar. So yeah, hopefully Taco Love will be the one that really stays for good in that restaurant space. But McHenry Row, which has always done very well, usually very well filled when it comes to their retail spaces, they do have a few vacancies there right now. So it'll be interesting to see those filled, see what might go in there. And just, tailing off that, there's really been a surge of new Mexican restaurants coming to South Baltimore. We just talked about Taco Love. Riverside Cantina opened on Light Street. That's been open for a couple of months, seems to be doing great. Lime and Salt is a concept coming to Riverside. They're on Belt Street. That's a restaurant that's been in Crofton and is going to open their second location in Riverside. And then Urbano is one of those new restaurants that's going to be coming to Baltimore Peninsula. So hope everybody's ready for Taco Tuesday. And Wednesday and Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, keep them up. Tacos every day. Love it.
And unfortunately, Federal Hill, South Baltimore lost their last bike shop. Trek closed in recent months in a 13,385 square foot retail space. So that leaves a big vacant space there on Key Highway, and unfortunately nowhere local to get your bike fixed. So that was certainly a sad loss for Federal Hill. Starbucks closed in the heart of Federal Hill, right there at Charles Street and Light Street. So that leaves a big vacancy in Federal Hill, no matter what people's opinions are on Starbucks and local versus national. But that was certainly a big space on a prime corner. And really, if you walk through Federal Hill right now, you will see a decent amount of vacancies down there. And I know we all hope that you're going to see some fun and vibrant retail that fills those spaces and quickly. We don't have time to mention every business that opened and closed in South Baltimore in 2025, but those were certainly some that we thought were notable. And then moving to Power Plant Live downtown, another concert venue has opened. Nevermore Hall has opened in the former home of Ram's Head Live, so that brings that live music space back to life. So that's been a good get for downtown. That's by the team behind Baltimore Soundstage. I do my weekend events around Baltimore article every weekend, and Baltimore Soundstage always has a packed weekend of music events. So that team now has Nevermore Hall, and they're getting that going. So if people love live music, it's certainly between Nevermore Hall. You got Paramount Baltimore coming soon. Certainly CFG Bank Arena has been named one of the top arenas in the country when it comes to live music acts. So if you're a live music fan, there's certainly a lot of options, and we'll get into some events coming to M&T Bank Stadium later. But certainly, if you love live music, it appears there's more options every year.
And don't forget about it. Good old 8x10, still there, doing great too. Live music every night, just about.
And really a story that really surprised me, I didn't see this one coming, is over in Carroll Camden industrial area next to Pigtown is the Gaslight Square complex. There's been work to get that space completely renovated, completely filled for many years. And I got the press release that Korean biotechnology company NatureCell is taking over all 100,000 square feet of that complex and projecting to bring 500 new jobs. So that's obviously huge news for South Baltimore. Not only is it bringing jobs and investment, but it's filling a historic complex that people have wanted to see filled for many years. So that was very cool. And then there's actually going to be 3 trade schools coming to the area, one coming to the former Len the Plumber building in Carroll Camden industrial area. Second Chance is doing the trade school aspect of their business. They bought a building in Pigtown/Carroll Camden. And there's another one I can't talk about yet, but coming to a very large property in Federal Hill. So good to see that people are getting some of the needed skills they'll need in today's economy and job market.
Yeah, that's really cool. I wasn't aware of that, Kev. So that's and I read southbmore.com every day, and I was not aware of that. So that's going to be huge.
Shameless plug. I did interview Mike Rowe one time, and he's a huge endorser of trade schools and trade works. So go back and check out that article. That was probably my favorite of all time.
Yeah, I remember that. That was great. So let's talk about something I know that's near and dear to both of us. Let's talk about the youth sports growth around the peninsula.
Yeah, it's just so cool. Every year we get to hear about these youth sports leagues growing and having success in South Baltimore. So South Baltimore Youth Soccer, they had over 700 players this year. That's incredible. Just so much hard work by so many people to get that league going, get the fields ready, get the uniforms ready. So a lot of hard work that goes into that. And that's really helped these local club soccer teams come to fruition and grow down here. Teams that use the name Sobo in their name. There's also Next Level, which is a club soccer program down here that's starting to to blend with the Sobo world. So really cool to see more opportunities for kids that want to play soccer anywhere from the beginning level to a really high level. You can do that right here in South Baltimore. That's really cool. SBYSL has been around for a really long time, but it's really starting to grow to record high. So that's really cool. South Baltimore Little League, they have over 600 players now and just busting at the seams of that complex they own there on Ford Avenue. They're working to get more fields in South Baltimore, which would be really cool to see them sort of expand out into the community. That has translated to the Sobo Baseball Club, which is club baseball that's happening in South Baltimore with a lot of those same players where the kids get the opportunity to play rec and travel baseball at the same time. Then back to South Baltimore Little League. They put together their all-star teams every year and attempt to win state championships and hopefully beyond that one day. But some of those teams have gotten pretty close to winning state championships the last couple of years. So that's really cool. Yeah, then you have the South Baltimore Basketball League, which is just getting going right now. And that was started a few years ago by Coach Kenny. And that keeps getting bigger. And now there's programs for all kinds of different ages, programs, all girls leagues and that. So a lot of new opportunities for kids to play basketball around here. There's Charm City Athletics, which has brought a flag football league to South Baltimore. That has expanded from just a spring league. Now they do it in the fall as well. You're seeing the elementary and middle schools around here start to get their own teams, where FSK started a flag football team this past year and actually won the championship. So that was really cool. You have middle school and elementary school soccer taking place, basketball teams. So it seems like volleyball teams. So it seems like there's new teams starting up every year. And it's great to see the kids in the area have opportunities to compete and play sports, but also it's good to see these public spaces activated.
So Kev, clearly there's been a lot going on around the peninsula, around South Baltimore this past year. And if we picture ourselves here recording in a year from now, I know there's going to be a lot of upcoming fun events happening and things we're going to talk about this time next year. We're going to be talking about Orioles playoff victory, at least one next year. Of course, we're going to be talking about that. But we do have a lot of fun stuff coming up in 2026. I'm just curious if you want to kind of touch on a few of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's setting up to be a fun year in 2026. So you have the Sail 250 Maryland and Air Show Baltimore, which is coming to town in June. People remember the Fleet Weeks they've done and the celebrations and the Star Spangled Spectaculars. So this is going to be one of those type of events. The Blue Angels are going to fly over. The Blue Angels haven't flown over Baltimore in an air show since 2018. So that's going to be really exciting. That is just an awesome day to have a roof deck or to be on somebody else's roof deck or just get a clear view of the city. Those are a lot of fun. Morgan Wallen, one of the biggest acts in music and country music, has announced 2 nights at M&T Bank Stadium in July. That is the first ever artist to do a 2-night concert in M&T Bank Stadium. So I expect there to be a lot of cowboy hats around South Baltimore that weekend, or I expect to see a lot of cowboy hats and country music fans around Baltimore that week. Lionel Messi, maybe one of the few most famous people in the world, one of the greatest soccer players of all time. I'm not going to get into the argument of him or Ronaldo, which one is better, but Lionel Messi's team, Inter Miami, is coming to M&T Bank Stadium on March 7th. They're going to play DC United. Lionel Messi has been in America for about a year and a half playing for the MLS, and every game he plays is just a sold-out event. They moved so many of his games to these big NFL stadiums. So that'd be really cool that it's coming right here to Baltimore. And then just up the road, we have the World Cup coming to Philadelphia. I know Baltimore tried really hard to get the World Cup to come to Baltimore. Unfortunately, it didn't happen, but you'll have some games being played up in Philly, about an hour and a half away. And just the World Cup in general, it's always a fun time to watch television and be a soccer fan. And who knows, maybe the United States team can make a nice run. And if that happens, you'll obviously see a lot of red, white, and blue at the bars around Federal Hill and Locust Point and Baltimore Peninsula, maybe. So just when the World Cup's going on, I always find that a really fun time. And even if the United States isn't doing that great, I think it's a lot of fun to watch, to see something the entire world takes so seriously. And then you mentioned it, the Orioles have signed Pete Alonso. They made a trade for Taylor Ward. They're bringing over 240 new RBIs into their lineup next year. So, the Orioles had a down year this past year, but we're in the playoffs, for a couple years before that. So hopefully the Orioles are back on track, and it's a really fun summer around Baltimore, attending Orioles games, watching the ball leave the yards. South Baltimore is always that much funner when the Orioles are doing well.
Absolutely. Shout out to our earlier this year podcast guest, Zach Brown, who was recently promoted to Vice President of Ticket Sales at the Baltimore Orioles.
Nice. Good job, Zach. I I mean, when you're the vice president of ticket sales and you get the press release that you signed Pete Alonso, it's got to be a good day at the office.
That's a good day. That's a good day. I also want to give another shout out to a previous podcast guest just a couple episodes ago, John Dewar, who was just sworn in for the Baltimore City Veterans Commission. So great job, John. In a future episode, we will have District Councilman Zach Blanchard on. Again, email us with your questions that you might have for Zach, and appreciate that. For any of you folks out there that might catch this podcast and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know if I want to move to Baltimore. I've heard stories. Let this be one that you hear that says you can live here, you can work here, you can raise a family here, you can grow, and just have a great life. We're here to tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna let you know about some fun stuff going on in Baltimore. And please, Nate, just put your email address in the show notes. All complaints can be forwarded to Nate about anything going on in Baltimore you're not happy about.
Anything in Baltimore.